Hello, friends, colleagues, fellow professionals. Welcome to the Airport Safety Channel, and I am your host, Isaac Otu. It is a privilege to welcome you all to this channel, and I know that this week is going to be a great week for each and every one of you. This is the last week of the month, and as we have decided to do, every last week of the month, we have a review of all that we have been doing during that month in question. This month, we have been dealing with how well do you know your facility? How well do you know your facility? And we are looking at the facilities in the aerodrome. We are trying to gain a better understanding of what goes into deciding what facility we provide in our aerodromes. So we are trying to answer the questions, how well do you know your facility? We are basing all our standards and requirements on Annex 14, Volume 1, Aerodromes, Edition 9. And currently, we are in Chapter 3. We are in Chapter 3 of the Annex 14, Volume 1. It is very important that we have this reference and also ensure that we are using the latest version of the Annex as at the time of this recording. So I encourage you all to tag along as we have a review of the month in question. Annex 14, Chapter 1, Section 6 talks about the Aerodrome Reference Code. Aerodrome Reference Code. And it explains that an Aerodrome Reference Code is a code number and letter which is selected for aerodrome planning purposes and shall be determined in accordance with the characteristics of the aeroplane for which an aerodrome facility is intended. So every aerodrome has an aerodrome reference code. This aerodrome reference code was determined while the aerodrome was being constructed. And if you are planning to build a new aerodrome or expand an existing one, then what you should be thinking about is what your aerodrome reference code will be. So throughout this month, we have been looking at the components that go into determining the aerodrome reference code. We have been looking at these components, and we are now putting all of them together for us to have a clear view of what makes up the aerodrome reference code. Thus, the main determinant of your aerodrome reference code is the runway. So we have been looking at what determines the length of the runway. We have also been looking at how we determine the width of the runway, and we have been thinking about the impact of this when put together. Remember that in constructing your runway, you have a reference aircraft. You have an aircraft in mind that you want to operate into your aerodrome. This aircraft is always the biggest aircraft that can operate to your aerodrome. It's always the biggest aircraft that can operate to your aerodrome. Therefore, if you go back to your operations now, go through your flight schedules, determine which aircraft is the biggest aircraft, and then based on that, you can start looking at what aerodrome reference code applies to your aerodrome. Annex 14, Chapter 1, Section 6 gives us a breakdown of these components. So we looked at the code elements that constitute the Aerodrome Reference Code. We were made to understand that the code elements are made up of numbers and alphabets. So the code element 1 is made up of numbers. We have code element 2, which is made up of alphabets. So the code element 1, which will be found in table 1.1 in Annex 14, gives us the code number corresponding to the highest value of the aeroplane reference field length of the aeroplanes for which the runway is intended. It gives us the highest value of the aeroplane reference field length of the aeroplanes for which the runway is intended. Remember, I mentioned that every runway is intended for a particular aeroplane. Therefore, the highest value of the aeroplane reference field length is what determines the code element 1. Therefore, your code element 1 refers to aeroplane reference field length which are less than 800 meters. That is code element 1. Code element 2 refers to aeroplane reference field length that are between 800 meters but not including 1200 meters. Code element 3 refers to runways which are between 1200 meters but not including 1800 meters. And code element 4 refers to runways which are 1800 meters and above. Note that the determination of the aeroplane reference field length is solely for the selection of a code number and is not intended to influence the actual runway length provided. Therefore, when you are determining the code number of the aeroplane in question, please, the aeroplane reference field length will only give you an idea of how long a runway should be, but should not be the main factor that will limit the runway length. You should consider other safety parameters such as temperature and other things when determining your runway field length. Therefore, if I mention that in my aerodrome, I have a code 4 runway, what it means is that I have a runway that is longer than 1800 meters. It doesn't specifically state whether my runway is 3000, whether my runway is 4000. No, it only states that my runway is longer than 1800. That will clearly give you an idea of the types of aircraft that my runway can receive. If I tell you that my runway is a code 3 runway, tells you that my runway is between 1200 meters and 1800 meters. It will give you an idea of the aircrafts whose aeroplane reference field length falls within that range. So that is the purpose of code 1. The code element 1. Code element 1. So we have code 1, code 2, code 3, code 4. Which one applies to your aerodrome? Remember to use a comment to tell me the code number in the code element 1 that applies to your aerodrome. So let's look at code element 2. The code letter for element 2 shall be determined from the table 1.1 in Annex 14 by selecting the code letter which corresponds to the greatest wingspan of the aeroplanes for which the facility is intended. Remember that in the previous lessons, we were shown how to measure the wingspan. That is the length from one tip of the wing to the other tip of the other wing. If this measurement is up to but not including 15 meters, then your wingspan falls within code A. If it is between 15 meter but not including 24 meter, then you are operating code B. Code B. If the aircraft wingspan is between 24 meter up to but not including 36 meters, then you are looking at a code C aircraft. If the wingspan of the aircraft is between 36 meter but not including 52 meters, then the aircraft falls within code D. If the aircraft wingspan is between 52 meter up to but not including 65 meters, then that aircraft falls within code E. And also, if it is between 65 meter up to but not including 80 meters, then that particular aircraft falls within code F. Code F. So these are the various codes of aircraft operating within our aerodrome. You will have a particular aircraft, a Boeing 737, and by having knowledge of the wingspan of that particular aircraft, you will know that it is a code C aircraft. If you are operating an A380 in your aerodrome, by virtue of its characteristics, you will know that it is a code F. But this is known if you look for that information. Based on the little work I've done around, I've realized that many airport professionals are buried only on specifically what they do without expanding or extending their view further. I encourage you to look for the information. Know the aircraft that are operating within your aerodrome. Have a fair idea of their characteristics, and that will help you know the aerodrome reference code within your aerodrome and guide you when you are planning facilities for your aerodrome. We have now reviewed code element 1 and code element 2, which constitute the aerodrome reference code. There is one more thing that we observed whilst we were going through the month, and we will do that very soon. But before then, remember to like, subscribe, and share to encourage others to join. So the final component that goes into determining your aerodrome reference code is the outer main gear wheel span. The outer main gear wheel span. And this outer main gear wheel span is the measurement between the outermost part of the wheel on one side to the outermost part of the wheel on the other side. Yes, that is how you measure your outer main gear wheel span. Every aircraft is unique, has a different span of outer main gears. Remember, this is not the measurement between the front wheel and the rear undercarriage. No, this is not the measurement between the front wheel and the rear undercarriage. No, rather, it is the measurement between the two outer main gears. So the rear undercarriage, you take the outermost measurement from one side to the outermost measurement on the other side, and the name given to that measurement is the outer main gear wheel span. Now this wheel span helps to determine the width of the runway. If you were observing closely, you discover that the code element 1 helps to have a reference length for the runway. Now to determine the reference width for the runway, we use or we depend on the outer main gear wheel span. Based on the information we gather after measuring the outer main gear wheel span, then we can tell whether the runway width should be 18 meters. That is, if the outer main gear wheel span is below 4.5 meters. Or if the runway should be 23 meters wide. That it depends on whether the outer main gear wheel span ranges between 4.5 meters but is below 6 meters. If the outer main gear wheel span is above 6 meters but below 9 meters, then the width of the runway will be 30 meters. If the outer main gear wheel span ranges from 9 meters but is below 15 meters, then the width of the runway should be a minimum of 45 meters. If the outer main gear wheel span of the reference aircraft is between 15 meters and above, then you are looking at a minimum width of 60 meters of runway. So the question once again is, what is the width of your runway? The width of your runway. This goes into determining the aerodrome, the aircraft that you can receive in your aerodrome. Remember, we mentioned only 2 code elements, and even though the outer main gear wheel span is a factor in determining the aerodrome reference code, it does not have a code element. It does not have a code element. Therefore, the main elements that are mentioned are code element 1 and code element 2 when you are determining your aerodrome reference code. So let's look at this table, the aerodrome reference code. On this table, you discover that we have a code number for code element 1. Code element 1. And then code element 2 is made up of the wingspan and the outer main gear. So when you are looking at the characteristics of the aircraft, you combine these characteristics of the aircraft, that is the wingspan and the outer main gear wheel span, to determine your code element 2. And for the code element 1, you look at your aeroplane reference field length. So once again, let's have a quick review. Your aerodrome reference code could be code letter 1 and code letter A, that is 1A. If your runway is less than 800 meters and the aircraft that you are receiving has a wingspan less than 50 meters with outer main gear of 4.5 meters. You can have another combination such as code 2A or code 2B. If your reference field length is between 800 and 1002, but it is having an aircraft or receiving aircraft with wingspan between 50 meter to 24 meter or even less than 50 meter. So it is very important to remember that your aerodrome reference code is made up of only these numbers and these alphabets. You can have a code 4F, a code 4E, a code 4D, or a code 3C, code 3D, or a code 3B. Could have a code 2C, code 2B, code 1A, code 1B, but you could not, it is not possible to have a code 2BB, no, or a code 3CDEF, no. You just pick one number from this side and one letter from this side. Only. Aerodrome reference code has only 2 elements, a letter a number and a letter. A number and a letter. That is what makes up the Aerodrome reference code. Keep this in memory, keep this close to you, and become familiar with the aircraft that falls within the code element ranges, so that you can easily determine what code of aircraft is, or what aerodrome reference code your aerodrome is operating. As usual, it's time for your inputs, and we have had a very exciting month, and I'm glad to share with you the various comments that your colleagues have been presenting. Yes, we had a comment or a question from one of our viewers, and it said, when an aircraft tire blasts on runway and the aircraft leaves the marks on the pavement, what are the things to be considered as a part of runway inspection? And kindly provide relevant IQ reference for this subject matter. Yes, this was promptly responded to, and I made it known to the viewer that yes, Annex 14, Chapter 2, Section 9, and Document 9981, Chapter 3, Section 3.1, and Chapter 3, Section 3.2 states that the frequency and purpose for an inspection provides the frequency and purpose for an inspection. So if you go into these particular references, it will tell you what is expected. What is expected. The annexes do not tell you specifically how you should do things, but it tells you what is expected based on what you are doing. So if you are conducting an inspection because an aircraft tire blast or FOD comprising of aircraft undercarriage was found on the runway, then you should be searching or inspecting the runway for particular items, and that is to ensure that you don't have FOD on your runway. There are no sharp objects that can damage or that could cause damage to other aircraft undercarriages. The runway is clear and good to use. Also, your local CAA will have guidance material on what they expect from the airport operator after an incident, and you must put all this together in order to be able to do your work efficiently. It followed up with appreciation, and I'm glad to have been able to answer your questions. I encourage you all to submit your questions and your comments, and I'll do well to respond to them. We also had another comment from another viewer, and he said, good day, Mr. Otu. Please, I need clearance on the arrow markings on the yellow center line. Is it supposed to be there? Well, this refers to one of the videos that was shown in one of the presentations, and I responded clearly that the yellow lines were different from the runway markings, and it was something else. The yellow leading line only seems to be merging with the arrows, the displaced threshold arrows, but it's not part of the displayed marking. Therefore, you need to have a closer look, and I like to recommend this to each and every one of you. Before you make judgment, you will need very close look at the items in questions so that you can make the right decisions. I'm glad to have been able to answer your questions, and I know that you have really learned a lot. Today, I'll still repeat the same bullet that I gave you previously, and that is for you to know the aircraft that operates in your airport and know the factors that affect the safety of the aircraft. Is very important for you to know. And that brings us to an end of this day's or this week's presentation. Thank you very much for watching. Do not forget to post your comments and your questions, and I'll be glad to answer them. Subscribe and click the bell and share with one and all. Thank you very much, and see you in the coming week.